Stay classy, Golden Eagles. This is going to be the first of probably 2 or 3 videos that go along with today's reading lesson. So I'll go ahead and label this part 1, part 2, and part 3 if necessary, just as a heads up. So this is unit 6 of our reading lessons, and we're still working on inferencing. You guys have previously worked on finding inferences in books such as Amelia's Road for Mr. Ferguson's class and Mr. Holt's class. And Mr. Holt's class has also done this with 2 other books, one which was Coming to America and another which was called Pepe the Lamplighter. Mr. Ferguson's class, we're going to skip those lessons. We may come back to them, but as of right now, we're going to go ahead and practice inferencing again, this time with a non-fiction textbook. And this one is called A Picture Book of Harriet Tubman. It is by David A. Elder and illustrated by Samuel Bird. Sit back, hope you enjoy. So guys, before we get into this is a biography of Harriet Tubman, who was born a slave in the 1800s. She later escaped from slavery and eventually led hundreds of other slaves to freedom by means of the Underground Railroad. I'm going to stop periodically during this reading, and yeah, you probably don't have a partner to turn and talk to, but I want you to be thinking about the questions and formulate an answer for yourself as I am asking you to think about a particular question or two. Does that make sense? Okay. So the first part of the book is about Harriet's life early as a slave. Okay? So we'll go ahead and get started. And I will show you the pictures. I know a lot of people ask about that. Harriet Tubman was born in 1820 or 1821 on a large plantation in Dorchester County, Maryland. Although the plantation had a big house with many rooms and fine furniture, Harriet was born in a small one-room log hut far behind the big house. The hut she was born in had a dirt floor, no windows, and no furniture. Harriet was the 6th of 11 children. Her father, Benjamin Ross, and her mother, Harriet Green, were both slaves. They were owned by Edward Broadus. He owned Harriet Tubman, too. And here's a picture of the plantation and a picture, or a drawing, my mistake, of her parents. The slaves worked hard all day, but they weren't paid. Harriet hated slavery. She was wild and often beaten. She was not willing to do as she was told. One time, Harriet was hired out to work for someone else. She saw a bowl filled with lumps of sugar. She said later, "Now you know, I never had anything good, no sweet, no sugar, and that sugar right by me did look so nice." She took 1 lump from the bowl. Harriet's mistress, Miss Susan, saw her take it and chased her with a whip. Harriet ran from the house and hid with the pigs. She ate potato peelings and other scraps until she was so hungry she had to go back. When she did, she was whipped again and again. Now guys, in this page they talked about hiring out. Yes, there were times where plantation owners who did own slaves would almost trade or with other plantation owners when they needed more help. And obviously guys, they did not give any of that money or anything like that to the slaves. Really sad. Edward Broadus sold lumber, apples, wheat, and corn that grew on his plantation. Sometimes he took slaves he owned and sold them down the river to plantations further south. Harriet saw 2 of her sisters taken away in chains. Harriet was afraid that one day she too would be sold. When Harriet was a young girl, abolitionists, people who were against slavery, were beginning to speak out and protest. Abolitionist newspapers were being published. So here's another drawing of a auction to sell and purchase slaves. And here is an abolitionist, somebody who's writing against slavery. Most people who were against slavery lived in the North. There were some people in the southern United States who spoke out against slavery, but it wasn't as common as it was for people in the North. And again, of course, there were still people in the North who approved of and owned slaves, just as a heads up. Nat Turner, a young slave, knew how Moses had led the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. He hoped to lead his people out of slavery too, and in 1831 he started a rebellion. Slave owners, their wives, and their children were killed. Nat Turner and others were caught and hung. Harriet dreamed that one day a true Moses will lead her people to freedom. So guys, this is going to be the end of video number 1. We're almost to the 5-minute mark. The next video, I'm just going to go ahead and start right in. So be ready, and we're going to come to a couple questions that I'll ask here in just a bit.